LGBT activism in Singapore. What is your position? The LGBT movement is one of the most successful and largest growing social movements in the world today. In Singapore, the LGBT community has come a long way in raising awareness for their fight for equality, expressions of love, and sexuality. To see how far along the movement has come, we review LGBT activism in Singapore for just the first half of the year 2021. We invite Singaporeans to take stock and consider the implications of LGBT activism for Singapore. In January 2021, Dr. Roy Tan Seng Kee, Mr. Johnson Ong and Mr. Brian Chung filed 3 separate legal challenges against Section 377A of the Penal Code. Also in January 2021, Singapore saw ripples of transgender activism. A Reddit post alleged that MOE intervened in hormone therapy, making headlines. Authorities responded, denying the claims. They made a further statement saying that the final decision for such therapy rests with students and their parents. Understanding that protest is illegal in Singapore outside of Hong Lim Park, what is your response to this protest? In February 2021, the Workers' Party raised questions about gender-based discrimination in schools in Parliament. WP's Dennis Tan shared the need for us to think of humankind instead of mankind as a better term due to its gender neutrality. Did you know something similar happened just a month before in the US?
The Democrat-led House kicked off the 117th Congress with new rules removing gender. On page 6, strike father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, and insert parent, child, sibling, and then strike himself or herself and insert themselves.
Are certain political parties importing North American political agendas wholesale into Singapore? Also, in February 2021, WP's James Lim asked whether there are any plans by the ministry to systematically compile preferred gender pronouns for students and to ensure that teachers respect such pronoun usage in class. Should teachers be required to use preferred gender pronouns? Do you recall that just 2 years prior in 2019, WP's chief Pritam Singh said that WP will not participate in the culture war over LGBT issues because this is prejudicial to the common good of Singapore. Is the Workers' Party shifting their position regarding LGBT issues? In response to one of the questions posed by WP, Minister Lawrence Wong said,
"Issues of gender identity have become bitterly contested sources of division in the culture wars in some Western countries and societies. We should not import these culture wars into Singapore or allow issues of gender identity to divide our society."
How can we prevent issues of gender identity from dividing our society? In March 2021, a National University of Singapore student, Dana Teoh, wrote an article published in TodayOnline. "This is why I don't want to be woke. Don't cancel me for it." In her article, Teoh expressed her concerns about the woke culture. "What I cannot get on board with is the cancelling of people and organizations for believing or saying something that opposes the woke stance. To what extent are we going to take this cancelling? I myself am not particularly well versed in trans issues, trans rights, trans experience, but I can't even admit I'd like to know, because now even asking can be construed as disagreeing or being unsupportive of the cause, and thus offensive." Her article led to a public backlash. Mothership reported a number of commentators were also particularly upset about Teoh's comments on transgender people and related issues. An American gay man, Dave Rubin, spoke of what's happening in America.
Every argument somehow, everyone that went against progressive think was somehow a racist or a bigot or a homophobe or a transphobe or a name another phobe, like everybody. And I thought, this can't be right.
Are American culture wars being imported to Singapore? Also, in March 2021, TodayOnline published an article titled Living with Gender Dysphoria. Transgender youths face stigma and inadequate institutional support. NGOs said that teachers need to address matters of gender identity and sexuality in the classroom. Would students be free to debate and have robust discussion about the logic, morality, or health risks of LGBT issues, or would there be simply a unilateral teaching of LGBT curriculum? How should matters of gender identity and sexuality be addressed in the classrooms? In April 2021, Corina Lim, Executive Director of A.W.A.R.E, the Association of Women for Action and Research, said,
"Imagine if every day girls and boys recited, 'We, the citizens of Singapore, pledge ourselves as one united people, regardless of race, language, religion, or gender.' Gender equality would quickly be imprinted in the collective consciousness of all these young minds."
Did you know that 5 years ago, in 2016, A.W.A.R.E amended its constitution to state that women includes transgender women and that men includes transgender men? They also allowed non-binary people to join as associate members. Should gender be based on biological signs, two sexes, male and female, or based on self-proclaimed identities? How should Singapore define gender? In May 2021, A.W.A.R.E posted on their Facebook page, Corina Lim made recommendations towards combating gender inequality in Singapore, including teaching comprehensive sexuality education in schools.
The United Nations and the World Health Organization advocates for countries to provide comprehensive education, sex education, or what we call CSE.
The World Health Organization's Standards for Sexuality Education recommends that children 0 to 4 years, in other words, infants and toddlers, be taught about the enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's own body, early childhood masturbation to gain awareness of gender identity, and to have positive feelings towards their own sex and gender, that it's good to be a girl or a boy. Do you agree with the WHO that infants and toddlers should be taught such things? Recently, Reza Khan from the Workers' Party proposed sexuality education for preschoolers, mandatory sexuality education for younger children, teaching students about consent. What is the role of parents in sexuality education for preschoolers? Can young children give informed consent regarding sexual matters? The United Nations International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education highlights the learning objectives for children 5 to 8 years. It is important to understand the difference between biological sex and gender.
One of the handouts that concerns me the most is called the Genderbread Person. They teach that gender is a spectrum, that you can choose to be whatever you want. You could be all female one day, and the next day feel like you're neither female or male.
We're confusing these kids as to what they are.
But remember that gender is not binary, right?
There's a spectrum.
We've been discussing a lot of the gender issues in class.
It's okay to be what you want to be. I was born as a girl, and then on the inside, I feel in the middle.
There are many different kinds of families that exist around the world, different family structures and concepts of marriage. How will comprehensive sexuality education shape the views of young minds? Also, in May 2021, PinkDot.Sg announced on Instagram, PinkDot exists as a protest against discrimination towards the LGBTQ community. For years, PinkDot has maintained that their annual event is not a protest. In 2009, this is not a protest. In 2011, it is not a protest. 2021, PinkDot is a protest. Why has PinkDot changed its stance? Also, in May 2021, the U.S. Embassy in Singapore co-hosted a webinar with a local LGBT organization, Oogachaga. MFA has reminded the U.S. Embassy that foreign missions here are not to interfere in our domestic social and political matters, including issues such as how sexual orientation should be dealt with in public policy. And in May 2021, LGBT activist organizations Oogachaga and PinkDot.Sg submitted a joint report to the United Nations saying that the existence of 377A has unambiguously impacted legislation and public policies in Singapore, and they urged the Singapore government to align existing policies with their recommendations. Their recommendations call for positive portrayal of LGBT plus persons and issues in mainstream media, LGBT affirming sexuality education in schools, recognize same-sex long-term partnerships and marriages conducted in other jurisdictions, develop comprehensive LGBT-specific programs, implement and fund LGBT-specific training, explicitly prohibit all clinical practices that seek to change one's sexual orientation and/or gender identity. Should PinkDot and Oogachaga be engaging foreign governments on domestic matters? What are your thoughts on their recommendations to the UN? In June 2021, Singapore Psychological Society denounces conversion therapy, advocates affirmative treatment for LGBTQ clients. As a professional body, the Singapore Psychological Society commits to the use of evidence-based practice to support the needs of LGBTQ+ individuals. Current research indicates the inefficacy and possible harmful effects of conversion therapy. As such, we recommend exploring and affirming their orientation or identity. The Singapore Psychological Society defines conversion therapy as psychological and therapeutic interventions with the primary aim of altering one's sexual orientation. These techniques include abstinence, gender lessons, prayer, or reliance on a higher power to change orientation. Are their conclusions based on sufficient evidence? Regardless.Sg, a news and media site, commented, surveying SPS's sources, taken at its highest, a deeper look at the sources provided paint a conflicting picture, and at its lowest, a misleading one. There are also traces of double standard, and most suffered from researcher bias. Circling back to SPS's push for evidence-based therapy, it appears that the evidence isn't all that clear-cut. We must ask hard questions and avoid shallow analyses. Only then will we be able to navigate this particularly explosive issue of conversion therapy. What are your views on conversion therapy? Have you analysed the evidence yourself? Also, in June 2021, A.W.A.R.E posted on their Instagram, there is no definitive way to express gender, and you can't automatically divine someone's gender identity. Pronouns validate who a person is. Using someone's chosen pronoun lets them feel seen for who they are. Recently, a British influencer came out as a non-binary Korean.
But I am coming out as non-binary. I don't feel I identify as male or female. I just feel like I'm just in the middle. And my pronouns are they, them, Korean, Jimin. And I do look Korean now. I do feel Korean. I don't identify as British.
Should a person's identity be based on facts or feelings? This is an episode of The Political Agenda by New Narrative featuring local activists.
Okay, so here let me just suggest one thing. On our IC it says male or female. Should we have at least one other option on our IC to say, to have another gender apart from male or female?
So our photo ID already reflect the true gender that you are in your everyday life.
I think it's great that you can reflect your gender identity on the picture on your IC.
Yes.
But the M and F still feels a bit like it's quite binary, no?
Is gender a social construct? Are there more than two genders? Also, in June 2021, the live stream of PinkDot.13 was promoted and publicized as suitable for children.
Now hit me live. I think I'm fierce. This thing I am. Honey, I'm Vanessa Williams, Catwoman, and Jessica Rabbit. Rolled into now hit me
live. Do you consider such content suitable for children? In recent months, LGBT narratives have been increasingly introduced to children globally.
This family has two mommies, they love each other so proudly, and they all go marching in the big parade.
Okay, everybody, I want you to meet my brother Dave. Hi. His husband Frank. Hi. And my sobrina Mia, my niece.
Hi, Mia.
I am playing the fairy godmother. Magic has no gender. We are presenting this character as genderless. Do you want to go to that ball?
Yes, I was just...
In July 2021, the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus released a message from the gay community.
We have a message for you.
You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked? Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. We'll convert your children. We'll make them tolerant and fair.
And the world's getting kinder. Gen Z's gayer than Grindr.
Learn to love, learn to vogue, face your fate. We'll convert your children. Someone's gotta teach them not to hate. We're coming for them.
We're coming for your children.
The gay agenda is coming home. The gay agenda is here.
The gay agenda is here. What did the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus mean? Have you heard of the gay agenda? What is the gay agenda? How will the gay agenda impact Singapore society? Ever thought of that? Has an upcoming video series, The Gay Agenda, reviewing the nature of LGBT activism, for you to know more and decide if it's good for Singapore and where you want to stand, or sit and watch. Either way, we will examine the strategies and methods of LGBT activism and explore its impact on LGBT persons themselves, on Singapore society today, and for the generations to come. Follow us on